This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Left, Right, Centre. On the program today, layoff season for startups. Are Indian entrepreneurs fighting for survival? That's our big focus. A very special panel with us. Before I introduce them to you, a quick look at our topic. Now, India's entrepreneurs and startups were celebrated. They were toasted. There were even days devoted to them. But then reality struck. And as is the case more often than not, it has been a very, very rough ride. Some say it's not going to get better anytime soon. Several thousand people have been laid off. Several hundreds of companies have shut down. But at the same time, there are others who are saying that we can't write off India's startups for entrepreneurs just yet. In fact, they're saying that some of these headlines may just be exaggerated. So just where does the truth lie?
A year and a half is a long time in the life of an entrepreneur. 2 years ago, entrepreneur Harshdeep Prapal thought he had everything going for him when he started Easy Meals, a food tech service for home-cooked meals. But 6 months later, reality struck and struck hard. The startup had to let go of most of their team of 20 people.
We thought that as the volumes pick up, the margins would improve, but that was not the case, and that was a harsh realization. Yes, to execute a different model, we required a different set of people, so we had to let go the current team.
Fast-paced growth meant startups burned cash at rapid rates. Last year saw a funding crunch and startup investments dropped by 28%. Internet businesses took a beating and the workforce is bearing the brunt of poor decision-making and rapid expansion. The founder of India's third largest e-commerce platform, Snapdeal, spoke of mistakes made and lessons learned while reaching the edge of the cliff as the company laid off some 600 people. Fashion portals Yepme, Tolexo and Craftsvilla have similar stories to tell, as does Stayzilla, a homestay startup. Yet here in the heart of India's startup capital, there's not much sign of panic or despair.
In the heart of India's startup capital here in Koramangala, several startups have shut down over the past 1 year, while others have opted for layoffs. But entrepreneurs still have optimism left in them, many saying the fundamental of the ecosystem is still intact.
Yes, to a large extent, these are all exaggerations if you ask me in all honesty. See, as with any industry, there is always a cycle which every industry goes through.
If you overhire, you have to lay people off, right? So it's a natural phenomenon.
So while it may be too early to write off India's startups just yet, the coming months will be a key test for entrepreneurs. In Bangalore with Harish Upadhyay, Riyal Meda and Natasha Jog, Yash Chawla, NDTV.
Well, let me introduce my panel to you right away. Joining me, Upasana Thakur, co-founder mobile wallet Mobikwik. Joining me from Gurgaon, Rituparna Chakrabarti from Bengaluru, co-founder and senior vice president TeamLease. This is a recruitment and staffing company. Sunil Mishra joins us from Mumbai. He's a chief strategy officer at PropTiger. This is, of course, the entity that's been created after the merger of Housing.com and PropTiger in February 2017. And with me in the Delhi studio, Ashok Madravali, director at NASSCOM 10,000 Startups. Thanks all so much for being with us on the program. Upasana, let me start by asking you, when Kunal Bahl wrote that letter that made headlines when he talked about laying off those people in his company and also the fact that the founders will not take any salary, there's a phrase that he said, the Me Too race to the edge of the cliff. He mentioned GMV is vanity, profit is sanity. Is that, you believe, Upasana, the root of the problem?
I believe that it is a somewhat disastrous situation, but like you started out, fighting for survival, that is sort of the dharma and karma of every entrepreneur all over the world. And right from the beginning, when an entrepreneur or a team of founders just starts out, they are anyways fighting to even get to the next level. I think at some point, market pressures, investor pressures, all kind of things come into play, and sometimes founding teams or management do tend to get carried away, and I think that it isn't really a doomsday. I think a lot of companies have corrected themselves, have pivoted, and have brought sanity, back to the way they build out their businesses. So yes, there are vanity metrics that people were chasing. There was excess money pumped into the Indian ecosystem a couple of years ago, and when people have excess money, they don't know how to utilize it efficiently.
Right,
so in many
you're saying
ways,
that people
the
have
real
pivoted,
way
perhaps
to build a
made
startup
these
from
mistakes.
scratch.
Sure, you're saying that people have pivoted, made these mistakes, pivoted, perhaps learned from them. Someone who sort of fits the bill perfectly with us, Sunil Mishra, like I said, of Prop Tiger Housing. Sunil, when you let those few hundred people go last year, I would imagine that the decision wasn't easy. When you take a look at what's happening in the space in other companies now in India, can you identify the problems, if they are the same kind of problems that you faced? Are everyone's mistakes somewhat similar? Is everyone confronted with the same kind of issues?
I just wanted to spend about 30 seconds or 45 seconds in setting a perspective for what's happening right now. And if we take a few steps back, we will sort of understand what's happening. So there are about 19,000 to 25,000 startups which got started in the last 5 to 10 years. And if each of them employs about 25 people, we are talking about 625,000 to 1 million employees in the quote-unquote startup arena. And if you look at all the newspaper articles in the last 6 months talking about quote-unquote layoffs, they add up to about 10,000 to 15,000. So actually we are talking about a 1 to 3% of the entire workforce employed directly. There's a 1x impact of indirect sort of workforce as well. But coming to the point and the question that you asked, that what are the reasons or what you termed them mistakes, but I'll call them reasons for laying off. So Prop Tiger specifically was a merger, and Prop Tiger and Housing was a symbiotic merger because there are different models. However, when two companies merge, there are overlapping functions, the enabling functions, and hence we have to let go people. So our sort of 200 people were part of that. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think what happens is that when people get laid off, especially in a country like India, this is a scenario that we are not familiar with. Upasna, if I can just get you in very quickly here, there are all those who say, half the problem is that the headlines, they say we don't want to believe the numbers, they're exaggerated. But is the problem, the point that Sunil is making, this is a tiny fraction, but in a country like India, is the bigger problem in a country like India. We don't really look as failure necessarily as something to learn from, but it's almost like a tag or a label we believe on your back that is going to doom you. And we need to break out of that mindset. Is that fair, Upasna?
We definitely need to break out of that mindset. As an example, I can tell you that within my organization of 250 employees, we must have at least 12 founders of ex-startups, failed startups, working for us today. We believe that failed founders are more valuable to us than, employees with good pedigrees and MBAs from top colleges with no entrepreneurial experience. So I do believe that this failure tag needs to go away. It is celebrated all over the world. Early employees and founders of failed startups all over the world get directly pristine positions in large tech startups as well as large companies. So, I don't see any need. And like my co-panelist was talking about, the percentage of people who get impacted negatively and in correspondence to that, the amount of value creation and job creation that young startups are doing, the positives are far higher. So I do believe that we need to have some pragmatism in terms of how we look at, these layoffs and some startups not doing well.
Rituparna, come in here. When we look at the larger story of job creation, of course, we're talking about these lakhs of jobs that startups were meant to create. The point that Sunil's making is that just a fraction of people so far, and let's hope that the numbers stay at that or perhaps even come down, have been let go of. But what about the larger job creation space in the country where startups were meant to play a big role? How badly is that taking a beating in all of this? Because all we're talking about is saving jobs at best, if not firing, but not about job creation now.
First and foremost, I think we have overdone the narrative around layoffs that are happening around startups, and the startup ecosystem that we usually end up talking about are usually technology-led startups. I mean, I was just putting together some numbers that over the past 6 months, out of the 175,000 jobs tentatively lost in this country, only about 3,500 have gone off from startups. So honestly, it's absolutely a tiny fraction. I think what we need to focus on is non-tech startups for massive job creation. And I think India is still a hostile habitat for any such startups which are non-technology oriented. Because I think the labor law situation hasn't improved as much as we would have expected it to be. Access to capital, improvement of infrastructure, ports, smart cities.
So despite all the headlines and despite all the celebration, you're saying there are serious challenges. Ashok Madrawali, come in here. Many people, even while we worry about, whether this is fair to only focus on startups, but I guess given the big banner headlines that have been devoted to India's entrepreneurs, it's only fair that many people now ask, and look at them closely when things perhaps somewhere do start going wrong. To all those who are asking what are mentors doing, why are investors sitting back, if things start unraveling, what would be your response?
See, I think we have to take a long-term view on this. This is the first wave of entrepreneurs coming into the ecosystem, so there is bound to be failure, and we are very bullish. In fact, if you look at all the investors that we've been talking to, everybody is very bullish about the Indian market long term. I think there is some course correction that's happening right now, which is only fair, and if you look at even all the e-commerce players, the GMVs have to go up. They have to bring in a lot more efficiency. All of that is going to happen. It may take another 3 years, another 5 years, but it will happen.
Okay.
So
that's good to know that you believe that we are on the right track and we will get there. Upasna, another issue that most entrepreneurs and startups, especially last year, began talking about was the fund crunch, because 2015 was all about the billion-dollar valuations, was all about the unicorns, was all about the big and even bigger salaries, and then came somewhat of a reality check. Now many are asking, is success for your entrepreneurship, is success for your startup only about deep pockets? Does it eventually just come down to that? What would be your response, Upasna?
See, I completely don't believe that deep pockets is the only way, because if I believed deep pockets is the only way to build a company or build a business worth anything, then I would have not even started out. As a startup, when you're starting from scratch, starting from fundamentals, 1 people, 2 people founding team, you first figure out your product, user, etc., etc. You have this in your mind that you're going to make it, and money is not the only thing that counts. Talent counts, product fit counts, what you're doing, the passion counts. And so, I see that in my everyday life where, every dollar of money that we spend in our company, probably many large companies are spending 10x the amount of money and still not getting the same ROI.
Sure.
So, having excess capital does spoil things for some companies, which is why I am a strong proponent and a believer that, when starting out, people should bootstrap, at least for the first couple of years.
Okay.
It builds the right practices, it builds the right way of building the company, because, like you were saying, having a unicorn or $1 billion status is really not worth anything if a year later you are going to fire half your
Absolutely,
employees.
fair enough. Fair enough. That, of course, brings me to my next question. Sunil Mishra, if I could put that to you, in the midst of all of this, there's been this entire debate about protectionism, about we need money from abroad, but we don't need foreign companies. So where do you really stand on that? And if, how many of you really believe on the panel is what I'd like to ask, whether that would solve the problem, and are you for it? Because that's also generated a huge debate. Sunil Mishra, first to you.
So there are different models, and when you talk about protectionism, people look at China on the internet side, where they sort of home grew sort of lookalikes of Google and Facebook. But we have subscribed to the sort of capitalist open market sort of way 20 years back, and I think that's the right way to move ahead. Personally, I don't subscribe to the concept of protectionism. It's a best business model should win its way through.
Sure.
When you double click on the ownership of even Indian companies, I think you will be sort of not surprised to see that most of the money is not Indian.